Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much for attending this important conversation on genocide denial. My name is Ariane Gugumaho, and I will co-host this conversation with my colleague from Digital Kwibuka, Bruce Intwari Murangira. So, Bruce, let me take this moment to ask you to introduce our panelists before we head into the conversation.
Yes, thank you very much, Ariane. Like you've seen today, we are talking about denial, genocide denial, and we're going to be tackling it from different sides. We're going to look at, its genesis, the various ways it manifests itself, and what we can do to be able to counter it. Today, we're joined by Jessica Mwiza Gérondal. She is the vice president of the Francis chapter of Ibuka, sorry. And she is also an Afrofeminist activist. We are also joined by Olivier Mushimire. He is a Rwandan educator, contributor to the Pan-African Review magazine. And our third panelist is Christian Intwari, who is known for his initiative, Our Past Initiative, of which he is the founder and director.
Thank you very much for introducing our panelists. Let me say that as a genocide against Tutsi survivor, my first traumatic experience was countering genocide denialism. I'm pretty much aware that if this sentence gets into the denier's ears, it's going to please them. However, it is with truth that we will conquer this fight, and this is part of the truth that we unfortunately have to share. So when we talk of denial, people tend to think of the literal meaning of the word saying no. The genocide against Tutsi did not happen. That is what people understand by genocide denial. However, denial takes many forms. And I would like to ask our panelists, how do you define denial? Olivier, let me start with you, please.
Olivier, I think you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for pointing out. I was saying for me, denial, it's part of the genocide, and I'm not really the one saying it. I'm speaking from experience, because the genocide as it was taking place, denial was part of that project to exterminate the Tutsi. And the denial is basically saying the lives of Tutsi don't matter that much. They are not, worth equal consideration as other people. The genocide itself is about denying the existence, the right to exist. And once those people you're denying the right to exist, once they are killed, you minimize their death and the responsibilities of those who killed them. So initially, I would, for instance, give an example of something I lived. During the genocide, I had taken a refuge at the parish, and we resisted. We fought back as killers would come to kill. After 3 days, this governor, they came with the commanders of the military and the gendarmerie, and they came. For them, the problem was that there were 2 gendarmes that had been killed at that parish, and Tutsis had taken their guns. So they had this meeting. They were like, first of all, they were saying Tutsis provoked the whole thing. And now the leaders from, this was from the prefecture, the province level, they are just for guns, to get their guns back. And as this discussion was taking place, there were bodies all over the place. That was like 3 days. We had been fighting and being killed for 3 days. And the issue, the debate was about the guns. And those bodies, you know, at the parish, the courtyard, or the people inside, they were not killed yet. So for me, that was already denial ongoing alongside the killings. So it is, for me, denial, it is denying the right to exist to a group of people. And once you have taken their lives, what follows is to, you know, to minimize, to make it meaningless. That's how I would summarize it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christian, would you like to add anything?
I was saying that I think I'm with him on that. But the key word in there is minimizing someone is death, someone who lost their loved ones, to always remember them as those who were killed during the genocide. So denying someone, denying the genocide is minimizing all those small sins that happen, the preparations of the genocide itself, and trying to not let at least those who lost their loved ones remember them as people who died during that genocide. So the fact that someone is saying, oh no, the genocide didn't happen, that's the key. You're minimizing all those sins, like
the experience the survivors
the experience they went through, and they're still going through right now. So you're not giving them the value they deserve, like those who lost their lives and those who are remembering their loved ones. You just you don't give it the value it deserves. That's it.
Thank you.
Et Jessica, pour vous, la négation, comment vous la définissez?
Comme l'ont dit mes deux amis auparavant, c'est avant tout la continuation du crime de génocide. Ça fait partie du crime de génocide. Aussi, la manière dont je le vois, c'est que la négation, c'est le harcèlement. C'est un véritable harcèlement fait aux familles de victimes et aux rescapés. C'est vraiment comme ça que je le vis. C'est que même en dehors de la période de commémoration, il ne se passe pas une semaine, 10 jours, un mois, sans qu'il y ait une parole blessante dans sa manière, ou un écrit, ou un livre, ou une série, ou un documentaire, ou l'annonce d'un documentaire. Il ne se passe pas en fait quelques jours, une semaine, un mois, sans que ce harcèlement ait lieu. Et ça, c'est aussi une manière de continuer de heurter les personnes pour ce qu'elles sont. C'est la continuation du crime de génocide, au-delà d'être bien sûr une manière pour les principaux responsables et complices de se dédouaner, de ne pas faire face à la justice.
Jessica says, for those who are not fluent in French, she was saying that she agrees with the previous two panelists that genocide is before anything else a continuation, denial is before anything else a continuation of the crime of genocide. But she also says that it is also harassment in a sense that you do not see a month or a week going by without there being an article or a news piece or a book or a social media post or something like that that keeps denying the experiences of the people who were fortunate enough to survive the genocide. And so she says that to her, denial is a continuation of the crime of genocide. It is harassment of the survivors, and it is also a way for the perpetrators to do their best to try and avoid responsibility for the killings that they committed. If you allow me, I would like to ask another question that is a bit in line with the question that Ariane had asked. When we talk of denial, people tend to take it in a literal sense. Denying means saying no. So people would think that denial just means people who say no, the genocide did not actually happen. But denial actually takes many different forms. So what other forms do we see, or have you guys experienced that denial manifests itself? Is it always just saying, no, the genocide did not happen? Or is it a form of amalgamation, or trying to equate the various things that happened along the way because it happened in the context of a civil war, and trying to equate those two things in order to minimize one or enhance the other? Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I will maybe go first. Like I said before, I will rather not speak from experience, and I'm sure Jessica is more conversant with more recent, sophisticated forms of denial. But one form I would even from from the time the genocide was happening was to that at that time was it was. I mean, maybe people believed it, but it was like saying Tutsis provoked their own death. Tutsis angered, the Hutu population. That was from the plain. It was the Tutsis. At my parish, it was the Tutsis that provoked and killed the gendarme. So that was one initially, and today we still read those arguments in that form, where victims are blamed for their own death. They are blamed for the genocide. Another form of denial I experienced. This is also something because Kwibuka is also really about memories. I also I think it's an occasion to share memories, and it is a form of denial, very ridiculous, absurd. I was fortunate to cross and fled to Burundi, as we are at the other side of the border. The leaders from Rwanda came at the border, asked to meet Burundian officials at the border, and they were asking them to return them the Rwandans that had fled. And they were saying, these people, they fled hunger. We need them. We can feed them. We can feed our people. Please return them to us. And this conversation was taking place at the border. There is those who have been at the Akanyaru, the border between Rwanda and Burundi. There's a river. It's a river with a bridge. You cross the bridge. The conversation was taking place on the bridge, and there were bodies passing under the bridge. And the Burundians said, but these people, these bodies in the water and in the river, it seems they were not killed by hunger. So of course the Burundians couldn't even believe that, people can come, leaders come to pursue, to try to get people who had fled, to get them back to Rwanda. Mm-hmm. So that was also another form of denial, trying to deny everything. Fortunately, I would say, maybe others will elaborate. Today, it's not. I don't think it's possible. It's not debatable now that the genocide against the Tutsi has taken place, has happened. Even deniers. It's strange. Foreigners, some foreigners, might find some foreigners now denying that, the genocide against the Tutsi took place. Some foreigners, but Rwandans, particularly those whose profession, whose cause they live, maybe they live for that and they make a living out of that, is now to make the genocide, to minimize it, but also to, the double genocide thing, even not inter killings. There was one who described it in the Kinyarwanda term. I find it the way I could. It's someone describing. This was a genocide perpetrator who was confessing his crimes, allegedly confessing. He said he described how the attackers went at a parish, and when they got there, he said, this is the term he used, rurazurungutana. This is like a rugby match when you throw a ball and the players from both teams are fighting for the ball.
Basically became a riot or...
it was like, it was like both sides fighting and, he literally said, rurazurungutana, abantu barapfa. That was his confession, his admission. He's even, he's not even involving himself in what he's describing. So it's finding other events and drowning the genocide inside and making a mixture or a cocktail of something. And, that is how, and those are people who say, if we don't have that cocktail where genocide is mixed with other things, no reconciliation is possible. Even during the mourning period, people are saying, but, you are only, genocide against the Tutsi, we need to mix with other things. If there is no that cocktail, no reconciliation is not possible. So it's like we survivors and actually Rwanda and the whole world has to, to bring down, to lower the gravity of this crime and bring it down to another level with other events. And that how we'll achieve reconciliation. Basically, that is what Americans and the British are doing.
Trying to dilute the events in order to please different sides.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jessica, est-ce que vous voudriez aussi répondre à la question?
Tout à fait. Dans le contexte français, on sait que le négationnisme du génocide contre les Tutsis a été vraiment propagé au plus haut niveau de l'État français. C'est Patrick de Saint-Exupéry qui le répète souvent en ce moment quand il fait la promotion de son excellent livre « La Traversée ». François Mitterrand lui-même a commencé tout de suite à parler des génocides. Donc moi, la négation que je rencontre le plus sur le terrain, notamment en ligne, c'est vraiment cette théorie du double génocide. Malheureusement, certaines personnalités politiques qui furent proches de François Mitterrand ont vraiment diffusé cette théorie, ce qui fait qu'encore aujourd'hui en France, vous trouverez des députés, des sénateurs, des maires négationnistes, des chefs de partis politiques. Je pense comme ça tout de suite de tête à Jean-Luc Mélenchon, qui est quand même le chef d'un grand parti, les Insoumis, à gauche, et pour qui le génocide contre les Tutsis, c'est presque un complot israélo-américain. Il y a aussi les socialistes qui n'ont pas changé d'idée, avec Olivier Faure à la tête du parti, qui lui n'est pas vraiment écrasé par sa culture générale et va juste bêtement répéter ce que dit Hubert Védrine. Toutes ces personnes ont énormément d'influence dans la vie publique ainsi que sur les réseaux sociaux, ce qui fait que de simples militants, citoyens vont pouvoir répéter en fait leur thèse. Également, nous avons en France encore de nombreux journalistes qui versent dans la négation et dans cette théorie du double génocide. J'ai vraiment remarqué ça lorsque Pierre Péan est mort. Il y a eu une multiplication des hommages, vraiment des hommages très, très solennels, très élogieux, dans absolument tous les organes de presse. Et chaque hommage parlait du livre raciste, négationniste, Noir Fureur, Blanc Menteur. On peut avoir également des anciens journalistes, du fait de leur notoriété, qui ne se gênent pas du tout à demander pourquoi, lors de nos commémorations, il n'y a pas aussi de commémoration pour les Hutus. Ça, c'était Vincent Hervoué sur l'antenne d'Europe 1. Donc, même s'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui disent qu'en France, ça va mieux, c'est certainement vrai par rapport aux USA, à l'Angleterre, il y a quand même énormément de problèmes. Et je voulais appuyer sur quelque chose qui est rarement souligné. C'est vraiment une tendance très inquiétante au sein de ce que j'appellerais le Black and Woke Twitter and Instagram. Donc, en France comme aux États-Unis, il y a un renouveau du combat féministe antiraciste décolonial. Ce combat est puissant, bruyant, suivi massivement. Des jeunes Français noirs, asiatiques, arabes vont être vraiment de plus en plus nombreux à questionner le rôle de la France dans l'histoire tragique de leurs ancêtres. Et puis, le racisme bien français les renvoie toujours à un ailleurs, en fait. Et le racisme s'immisce dans tous les aspects de leur vie. Donc, ces jeunes vont s'organiser, militer, lire, se renseigner sur ces questions de racisme, d'histoire, d'identité, de colonialisme, de néocolonialisme, de France-Afrique. Et ça, c'est une bonne chose. C'est pas ce que je critique du tout, parce que moi-même, c'est ma démarche. De plus, en France, on a de plus en plus d'excellents journalistes, sociologues qui sont vraiment de cette branche-là. Mais malheureusement, beaucoup de ces cercles vont être noyautés par les négationnistes. Et c'est ni un microcosme, ni quelque chose de peu important, c'est vraiment massif. On va avoir par exemple des médias communautaires, comme un média qui s'appelle Nofi ou Negro News sur Facebook, qui ont 1 million chacun de followers, qui vont produire soit des très mauvais articles sur l'histoire du Rwanda, soit des articles négationnistes, mais surtout, ils ne modèrent pas leur section commentaires. Donc, par exemple, ils vont faire un article sur le système de santé rwandais. En dessous, il y aura une dizaine, une vingtaine, une cinquantaine de commentaires haineux de personnes qui vont appeler à marcher sur le Rwanda, à se venger, à prendre les armes, qui vont avoir tout un tas de propos choquants et qui vont mélanger en fait les Rwandais, les Tutsis. C'est jamais très clair ce qu'ils disent en fait. Je parle aussi de certains hashtags sur Twitter, comme Congo Genocide, Congo is bleeding. Et encore une fois, il n'y a pas de mal à vouloir pointer le fait que le Congo souffre, mais il y a vraiment cette théorie du double génocide qu'on va retrouver dans tous les messages qui accompagnent ces hashtags. Et ce sont des campagnes numériques qu'on peut voir apparaître 1 fois, 2 fois, 3 fois par an et réellement suivies massivement. Ensuite, il y a les comptes Instagram, des comptes suivis par des milliers de personnes. J'ai un exemple en tête, par exemple un compte qui s'appelle Afroconscience, qui avait fait la publicité de Charles Onana et de ses thèses pour ensuite poster du jeudi rêveur. Et j'avais essayé d'interpeller cette personne en vain. Mais ce compte, c'est vraiment un exemple classique de ce qui existe par centaines en fait sur la toile et sur ce réseau, parce que c'est une mode. Il y a beaucoup de personnes qui font des comptes un petit peu généralistes, qui auraient vocation à parler des histoires africaines pour la diaspora noire européenne, mais en voulant parler de tout et sans connaissance réelle. Dès qu'il s'agit du Rwanda et du génocide contre les Tutsis, ça va être à 90% du négationnisme. Donc moi, c'est ce que j'observe, c'est énormément de négationnisme sur cette thèse du double génocide, donc du génocide contre les Hutus qui aurait eu lieu, on sait qu'il n'a pas eu lieu au Congo, mais ça a vraiment touché la jeune génération de personnes soit afro-descendantes, soit militantes décoloniales, qui émergent en France et en Europe aujourd'hui. Et bien sûr, il y a des personnes qui s'en frottent les mains. Je pense aux diasporas rwandaises négationnistes, par exemple organisées dans l'association Jambo en Belgique, qui vont en fait infiltrer aussi ces réseaux militants antiracistes décoloniaux et alimenter toutes ces thèses-là. Donc c'est vraiment un cercle vicieux de vraiment beaucoup de n'importe quoi qui est récupéré au final par les vrais idéologues négationnistes qui arrivent à piloter leur campagne de haine.
Merci beaucoup, Jessica. Je vais essayer de traduire votre intervention. Jessica was talking about that in the French context, we know that genocide denial was propagated at the highest levels of French government, including by former President Mitterrand himself, who by 1995 was already talking about genocides in plural. And today we find it propagated by politicians like Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is the head of the, c'est quoi encore le parti de Jean-Luc?
Les Insoumis.
Of the political party Les Insoumis, or Hubert Védrine and others. Politicians with huge followings, which makes ordinary people repeat all these assertions. There's also journalists who are contributing to these denial narratives. For instance, when Pierre Péan died a couple years ago, I believe, most of the eulogies that were really talking, nothing but good things about him were all mentioning his absolutely negationist book, Noir Fureur, Blanc Menteur. But Jessica also talks about another aspect of this, which is the Black Walk activists, especially in the US and France, where we find a lot of young people who immerse themselves in anti-racist activism, fueled, of course, by their lived experiences. And that is a good thing. But then these get co-opted by negationist networks. And so you find, for instance, the community radio Nofi and its Facebook following that's 1 million strong, that posts all sorts of nonsense on Rwanda, or hashtags like Congo is bleeding or Congo genocide, or the IG page Black Conscience that keeps pushing the narratives and the words of Charles Nana, who is a renowned genocide denier. And so she says that the issue is not really wanting to speak out against oppression, but the problem is that they're trying to do so and to speak about everything without the proper historical knowledge or the proper context. And so, of course, all of these are then co-opted by actual genocide deniers who have a stake in making sure that people do not know the truth of what happened in Rwanda. Organizations like Jambo, ISBL in Belgium, which are predominantly made of descendants of people who are actually genocide fugitives. I think I'm not missing anything in your contribution, Jessica. Thank you very much.
That is well summarized, Bruce.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if Christian would like to add something on the same question.
So what I want to say is a very, very simple example of denying the genocide or just denial. For example, you mistreat someone until you push them to go in exile. They stay there I think since 1959. So you push someone to go into exile, they stay there, they plan how they can come back, they start dealing with you peacefully until something like genocide against the Tutsi happened. Then those people come back, they start living with everyone. Reconciliation is there, trying to rebuild the country and stuff. Then we have people like those old women and those children that their parents left. And we had programs like Girinka Munyarwanda. So after you deny someone, you denied like someone, you didn't want them to live, they survived 59, 62, 73, 94, and someone who survived with one kid or who is the only one person who survived in the whole family get the chance to get one cow in Girinka Munyarwanda program. Then for you to keep denying their well-being or them being alive, you go there, you kill their cow, you not only kill their cow, you beat them to death. So for the last almost 60, 45, 50 years, you just denying someone to live. You don't want someone to exist. That's the very simple example of denial, you know?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Christian, thank you very much. Before we proceed to the next question, I would like to highlight something very important that Olivier said, and that is for us to be informed that denial doesn't happen after the genocide. It's something that evolves. It starts before the genocide, as the genocide is being planned, during the genocide, and after the genocide, as well as the points that Jessica pointed on, the platforms that are being used currently and what we really have to fight and all the forms that denial can take. And I think what Christian has just described is the continuation of torture and harassment to the survivors, as Olivier earlier said. Let's move to the second question, and I would like to start with Olivier on this one. What does denial look like on a local, regional, and international basis? Is there a difference in those three?
Very. I would first of all really say that the denial, for me, denial is whether it's big, small. I don't even really think it's a problem, because that's what I expect from them. Mm-hmm. I was never convinced that they gave up on their ideology and their wish to exterminate the Tutsi. So there are people who would carry on that project if they could get an opportunity. So denying the genocide, it's really natural for them. For me, of course, we can discuss how it is. I would think locally, from my home village, from my surroundings in Rwanda. Of course, people, I would say, I don't like to say ordinary Rwandans, because there's no extraordinary Rwandan, but people in Rwanda who live the experience of genocide and post-genocide society, with who want to rebuild the country, a united country. I think denial is in the. I have hope in the youth that is not very articulate. I would say it's not there. It's not absent, but it's not articulate, and maybe I think denial also happens. It's more visible in the, or more dynamic in the diaspora. I wonder, sometimes it's my speculation, maybe really because people are in Rwanda are more focused on developing themselves, on involved in this dynamic of development, of rebuilding their country, and spend less time on politics, even though development is politics. Family, educating your children is politics, and going to work and trying to to develop one's family is. I think when the focus is on that, the youth are focused on studying, on working, innovations, and other things. There is less. So in the people who fled and who had reasons, and don't tell me that these were kids during the genocide. That is an argument that I always have. I have the right to doubt when someone says that they were kids. How old were they during the genocide? I will tell how the kids that I encountered and I witnessed, things I experienced at the hands of kids during the genocide. So sitting in Belgium and leading Jambo and saying you were kids, you were too young. Someone said there was no right age. There was no majority age to commit the genocide. There was no gender. There's people, whether young or old, who were responsible, whom we know that were responsible, and those maybe whose responsibilities will never be known. They have reasons, and they have time in the diaspora outside Rwanda, and they have impunity to do it. They can do it with impunity. So it is more, I would say, in the outside Rwanda, outside the borders. Of course, in the region, less, and in the West, Europe, America. We recently saw in Australia some people protesting with the flag of SEDER. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen that. Wow.
Very, very, but for me, maybe I will go back to what I said earlier, that it's not really a problem. The problem is, how is our response? How is our fight? How is, our cause? How do we, because for some people for them, the deniers, it's from January to December, but for us, or for some of us, it might be just during the morning week, April from 7th to 13th. Tomorrow it will be over, we pass to other things, or maybe the 100 days. But for deniers, if for deniers it's 365 days per year, day and night, YouTube channels, tweets, and all other things we are learning, like from the trials we have, and we see how they are plotting every day. For us, we shouldn't even say that deny is a problem. Personally, if you think deny is a problem, I think it's because you are distracted. You think, you are not investing as you should in fighting denial.
Olivier, that's a very interesting point you're making there, and I think we'll come back to it later. The fact that you say that denial is not really a problem, I think we'll come back to you and try to dissect that. But for now, Jessica, I wanted to ask you, we may understand the motivations of some Rwandans in perpetrating denial narratives. We've already touched on some. These are people who actually fled Rwanda because of the crimes they committed here. These are their children who have grown up being, indoctrinated in the same views and the same beliefs. But you were talking earlier on about journalists like Pierre Payan or Charles Nana. But there are also, and politicians, but there are also academics like Judy Rever, Philip Huygens, Peter Verlinden, and others, who are also, actually putting efforts into denying or minimizing or trivializing or trying to, bring some revisionist narratives around the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994. I wanted to ask you, what are their motivations? Why do you think they're doing this? And number two, what exactly are their tactics?
Pourquoi le font-ils? Il y a eu tellement de noms cités que les raisons sont quand même différentes suivant les personnes, je pense. Pour parler des journalistes français, il y a une certaine proximité en France entre les journalistes et le monde politique. C'est pas quelque chose de nouveau et ce n'est pas une critique sans fondement de ma part, parce que nous sommes en France régulièrement classés de manière assez médiocre sur les classements internationaux de liberté de la presse pour cette raison, parce que les journalistes sont très proches des politiques et que c'est quelque chose qui se continue en fait depuis des années. Donc, il y a des personnalités qui vont, par exemple, défendre corps et âme François Mitterrand, son héritage, parce que ça leur tient à cœur, en fait. Et c'est pour ça que ces personnalités-là, ces anciens journalistes, parce que, par exemple, M. El Kabbach n'est pas tout jeune, c'est comme s'il défendait toute son éducation et tout ce qui a fait de lui le journaliste qu'il est, en fait. Ça va être très différent des personnes comme Judy Rever et Charles Onana, qui, pour moi, même si je n'ai pas de preuves matérielles, sont plus que liés aux auteurs du génocide, potentiellement payés par soit les auteurs, soit les complices. Ça, c'est une théorie. Donc, c'est pour ça que les personnes qui vraiment sont idéologues du négationnisme ont plusieurs raisons de le faire. Maintenant, ça, c'est pour les personnes qui ont du pouvoir. Les personnes qui n'ont pas vraiment de pouvoir, ça va plutôt être l'explication, ça va plutôt être le racisme, en fait. En France, moi, j'ai vraiment envie d'insister là-dessus, sur le fait que l'histoire du génocide contre les Tutsis n'est pas vue comme une histoire importante. Le Rwanda n'est pas vu comme un pays important. Et c'est bien pour ça que François Mitterrand avait pu se permettre de dire qu'un génocide dans ces pays, c'est pas important. C'est quelque chose qui va être vraiment ressenti dans toutes les discussions qu'il peut y avoir sur notre histoire. Donc des journalistes, même s'ils ne sont pas idéologues, même s'ils ne sont pas négationnistes, vont parfois écrire juste n'importe quoi, ne pas faire l'effort de recherche avant de produire un papier sur notre histoire. Et ce que je dis souvent, c'est que ça nous fait autant de mal, en fait. Un négationnisme, parce qu'il n'est pas pensé, réfléchi, prémédité, et qu'il est juste, je mets des guillemets à juste, issu de l'ignorance, n'est pas moins grave que le négationnisme de la personne qui est convaincue qu'elle doit défendre l'honneur de son pays, de la France, de Mitterrand, de je ne sais qui encore. Donc il y a ces deux aspects-là, chez les journalistes en tout cas, et chez les hommes politiques aussi. Parce qu'on peut trouver, moi j'ai fait partie des Jeunes Socialistes France pendant des années, et j'ai pu trouver par exemple des personnes de mon âge qui n'ont aucune raison de soutenir les thèses négationnistes de Mitterrand et d'Hubert Védrine, mais qui pourtant le faisaient parce que c'était complètement insupportable pour elles d'entendre que leur parti, que leur maison politique est trempée dans quelque chose d'aussi atroce, d'aussi condamnable et qui a autant de conséquences. Donc c'est vraiment très différent pour toutes les personnalités que vous avez citées pour que je m'exprime sur leurs raisons. Elles sont vraiment extrêmement différentes. Un Regents, par exemple, l'universitaire belge, lui, c'est très clair. Il était aux côtés du pouvoir rwandais. Il a écrit une constitution rwandaise. Lui, si on parle des années qu'il a fallu pour créer la division entre les Rwandais eux-mêmes, la manipulation politique, juridique qu'il a fallu mettre en place au sein du Rwanda, il en fut un architecte. Alors si maintenant il fait partie des personnalités les plus agitées, que ce soit sur les réseaux sociaux ou ailleurs, dans les conférences et dans d'autres cercles de pouvoir en Belgique, il en a une raison directe. Il pourrait complètement être inquiété si on parlait de réparation par rapport aux années qui ont précédé le génocide. Et c'est quelque chose qu'en termes militants, on pourrait très bien faire, même s'il ne s'agit que d'une question morale. Et c'est pour ça qu'il défend corps et âme ces théories négationnistes, tout en faisant très attention de dire à chaque fois « mais le génocide contre les Tutsis a existé, je ne dis jamais que le génocide n'a pas existé ». Donc chacun, en fait, a une tactique qui est liée à son histoire et à sa proximité avec le crime des crimes, le génocide contre les Tutsis au Rwanda. Ce qui est maintenant plus inquiétant, c'est l'impunité avec laquelle ils arrivent à s'exprimer partout. Quand je parle d'Hubert Védrine, encore hier soir, il était sur France 2, l'une des principales chaînes françaises, les plus suivies, les plus écoutées, surtout le soir, avant les programmes de divertissement. Et il a pu développer tranquillement, encore une fois, ses explications en fait, sur le rôle de la France au Rwanda. Il a pu se vanter, se réjouir de la conclusion du rapport Duclerc qui écarte les complicités. Et pendant ce temps-là, sa maison d'édition, qui est une grande maison d'édition française, tweetait fièrement. Ça, c'est quelque chose qui est de l'ordre de l'inacceptable aujourd'hui. À quel point ces personnes sont fières, tranquilles, pas inquiétées, pas punies, ni même socialement en fait. On continue à les inviter tous les 4 matins partout. Et c'est vraiment la question qui doit nous animer en tant que militants. Comment faire pour que ces personnes cessent d'être aussi à l'aise avec leur discours de négation? Comment agir dès lors qu'on entend dans un grand média, un grand journal, ou même pas un grand en fait, mais agir quand on entend des propos de l'ordre de ce harcèlement négationniste?
Jessica, j'en profite pour vous poser cette question par rapport à ce que vous nous dites et par rapport à ce que vous nous avez dit aux réseaux sociaux qui s'augmentent. Pourquoi
Ariane,
oui.
Si vous le permettez, je voudrais un peu traduire son intervention.
D'accord, donc la question que j'ai en fait va avec ça, mais c'est bien traduit, il n'y a pas de souci, je vais la poser après, il n'y a pas de souci.
Yes. So the question to Jessica, as you may remember, was what are the reasons we see some Western politicians, journalists, academics, perpetrating these denial narratives, and what are their tactics? And so she said, talking about journalists first, that there's a proximity in France between the press and the politicians themselves, something that has actually negatively impacted France's standing in the freedom of the press worldwide. She talks about the fact that there are some who would defend with their lives people like Mitterrand, but on the other hand, she says that even though she does not have actual proof, she firmly believes that people like Charles Nana or Judy River are actually being paid by people with a direct hand in the crimes that happened in Rwanda in 1994. She says that Other journalists, though, become deniers purely out of laziness to do the actual legwork necessary to find the truth. But she also makes sure to mention that these still negatively affects Rwandans and especially survivors. Another aspect that she brought out is something akin to a blind patriotism or loyalty to the country or a certain political party, where we have people, she gave an example of young socialists she actually was part of, where you found some members absolutely refusing to accept France's responsibility in the genocide because they cannot wrap their minds around the fact that their political party or their country could have done something so horrendous or horrible. She also talks a little bit about Philip Reingens, and she makes sure to remind us that this was someone who was among the architects of Rwanda's 1978 constitution that was, for all intents and purposes, an apartheid document. And so in this context, his reasons for doing his best, being very agitated in trying to deny the fact that the genocide in Rwanda happened are actually very understandable. But she talks about the biggest concern is not really the fact that these people are denying the genocide. The biggest concern is the impunity with which they say all these things they say. She talked about the fact that Hubert Védrine was just yesterday on a very popular TV show saying the things he always says. And her last remark is that the question that we need to tackle and we need to find an answer for is what needs to be done in order to make sure that these people do not say things like this comfortably. How do we bring them to account for the things they say that are the complete opposite of the truth that people have actually lived?
Thank you, Bruce. So my question is, why do the people who push the denial narrative seem to be more given a platform than actual survivors? This is something that I would like to understand from all the explanations that Jessica has given in the example that she gave us on the person who was on TV yesterday. Why are they given more platform than actual survivors?
Encore une fois, ça a beaucoup à faire avec le racisme systémique en France. De manière générale, les médias sont réellement réservés aux personnes blanches d'un certain âge et plutôt masculines. Ça, c'est le premier fait. Sur des sujets aussi précis que le génocide contre les Tutsi au Rwanda, en fait, chaque média va avoir une ou deux personnes de référence à appeler. Le négationnisme ayant fait son travail, ils vont contacter les personnes pour représenter, comme ils disent, les deux thèses, comme si elles se valaient, bien sûr. Et à partir de là, malheureusement, c'est cette paresse teintée de racisme qui va faire que toujours les mêmes personnes sont appelées, et généralement, ce ne sont pas des personnes rescapées. Et c'est vrai que c'est un travail que nous devons faire, que nous essayons de faire en tout cas, de porter la voix des personnes survivantes au plus haut, parce que c'est aussi la meilleure manière de contrer les discours négationnistes. Et que je ne sais pas comment une personne malhonnête peut tenir son discours face à un témoignage aussi puissant que celui d'un survivant. Après, on a un problème, une position, disons, c'est que souvent nous refusons aussi d'aller débattre contre les négationnistes. Parce que c'est Pierre Vidal-Naquet qui disait que pour débattre avec quelqu'un, il faut avoir une base de compréhension mutuelle. Et nous n'avons aucune base de compréhension mutuelle avec les personnes qui nient et qui mentent à un tel niveau. Donc c'est aussi pour ça que certains médias français aiment le débat, aiment porter le débat des deux thèses, comme ils disent, même si c'est complètement, totalement irrespectueux. Et face à cela, souvent, nous ne pouvons pas aller donner la contradiction à une personne négationniste. Ce n'est pas une manière de faire. On ne débat pas avec les négationnistes, on débat sur le négationnisme, mais pas directement avec les assassins de la mémoire. Et tout de suite, pardon, pour finir, c'est moins attrayant pour les médias français, en fait.
Yes, Bruce, did you,
Bruce,
can you please
your mic.
translate?
Sorry,
Thank you.
Jessica, in answering the question, says that this really has to do with systemic racism. In France, the press is, majorly white, and the kind of laziness she talked about earlier that is tinted with racism, and that makes that whenever discussions around Africa or around Rwanda happen, there's usually just one or two of the same people who will always be called to make comment or intervene on the subject. And these are usually people who, of course, are pushing denial narratives. And the other issue she talks about is the fact that the press really likes to frame things within the framework of a debate, really wanting people to express two sides of an issue. But the problem becomes that you cannot really debate with someone who you do not at least have a mutual baseline of understanding. You are not going to debate with someone who actually at one point in their lives denied your humanity and continues to deny the experiences that you live. There is simply no way you can be on the same platform. And so really this becomes the issue that causes what we see today is people, the deniers and the people who try to trivialize the history of the genocide, getting more and more of a platform than the actual survivors who lived through it and who survived it. Chris, I would like to come back a little bit to denial in the digital space. It's something that we talked about, but I would really like to hear your thoughts on why we see it growing every day. What do you think is the trend, is the reason for this trend? It's something that has been growing consistently, but especially I would say over the last 2 to 3 years, where we see that there are spaces, especially on Facebook and Twitter, that are really, really saturated with denial narratives, with negationism and revisionism. Why do you think this is a trend?
Thank you, Bruce. I think there is one thing that the deniers have been always, they have always been there. And the politics in the media and between one country and another have always been there. But one thing is, we have the first generation before us that knows everything to what happened.
Mm.
And those people, most of them, they are not even on those platforms, because they know every time they want to remember or commemorate or remind themselves of what happened, they know where to go. They know memorial sites. They know where their family members died. And what has been happening is these people are targeting young people because they're the one that you can easily manipulate, and they know where to find them. Those platforms you're saying, I think like 70% of the people that use those platforms are young people,
Mm-hmm.
So the fight now is not between those old people. I even talked about it 2 days ago during our event. There is the first generation that stopped the genocide, and there is us, people who survived the genocide but were too young during that time. Then we have those people who fled, who went to Congo, Zambia, all those countries. They have kids too, and those kids are not on the side of the survivors who survived the genocide that their parents did. You see what I mean? They are
Yes.
being educated by the same people that fled the country, after doing the genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way they can fight, they are not, okay, I trust our defense forces. They're not going to be able to do it anytime soon or even later. But the only thing they can do is keep denying that the genocide happened, that their parents did it, or even some of those parents are on social media, because they know that's where they can easily get people who can listen to their nonsense. And now the fight is between the upcoming generation and on our side, if I may say, and the upcoming generation on the other side. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So now the fight is about who gets more who is being more exposed on those platforms. But again, it is about how we are educating ourselves and how they are educating those kids out there, So it's all about how we are using those platforms. Because denying genocides, it's not something that started 2-3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. We
have seen people going to court every single day, accusing Rwanda of doing ABCD because they cannot come back here and just go freely like they do out there, We have seen people posting pictures of the current Rwanda using the pictures of back then, 1994, 1993, because they don't want to admit that they did the genocide, they destroyed this country, but after the genocide, the country have been in a process of rebuilding, reconciliation, all those stages that now the country is a strong country, a beautiful one. So it's about how we are using those platforms and how those people are being supported by some foreign countries, like those countries that are not admitting that they had their role during in the genocide against the Tutsi back in 1994.
Olivier, I would like to ask you a question. Earlier on, I had talked about the fact that we would be coming back to it. Earlier on, you talked about the fact that denial is, in your opinion, should not be a problem. That Rwandans, especially Rwandans living in Rwanda, should be much more concerned about doing our best to develop our country and our people, and that denial should not really be a problem. But then from the interventions of both Christian and Jessica, we're seeing a consistent increase in denial, especially on digital platforms, but also, in the media and in events, in colloquiums, conferences, different platforms that are giving really, a space to deniers instead of survivors. My question is, don't you think that part of the reason why this is happening, on top of what Jessica talked about, don't you think that there's a level of complacency on our part that gives this phenomenon, a space to exist? That we think that facts are there, facts can speak for themselves, but then we tend to forget that the majority of the audience that the deniers are speaking to have little or no information about Rwanda and are susceptible to actually believe whatever they're going to be hearing first.
Brice, thanks for that question. And my comment, I will also, I think, comment on the question I read from Ror Iaga. I think if we are doing the right thing, if we do the right thing, denial will still exist, but will not be a problem, will not be a threat. We will just live with it and coexist. Doing the right thing, one of the things to do is the question that Laure asked about. It's about the youth and education, and maybe even the how best to approach the younger generation, especially those who
allow me. Let me read the question very quickly.
Yes.
Laure says, how best can we approach the younger generation, especially those who were born after the genocide against the Tutsi, and most especially today's young children, as we preserve their mental health and avoid that they get affected by intergenerational trauma?
So I really don't have an answer for that, but I think we all need to acknowledge that it's a problem. It's a question. It's a very valid and very pressing question. Not only those who were born, there were others who are young people in general too. I think to fight to deal with denial, people need to understand the genocide. Knowledge is the weapon against denial. The primary knowledge, the basic knowledge about the genocide, of course, it's like many have mentioned, especially it's to know the genocide. Here, the story of the testimonies of survivors. It's traumatizing. Sometimes people, we protect there is, it's a trend to protect one's mental health. But survivors have lived with these testimonies. If they can live with these testimonies, people should be able to receive these testimonies and process them. We saw on Twitter, someone posted a video, very brief, short footage of a genocide scene, a real scene of the genocide. And the comment, it's like, people are finding it, how can this happen? How could people do that? How, it's like beyond imagination. It's like 27 years later, we are, we are still, we can still be shocked. Of course, it is shocking, but it's something we immediately want even to close. And but if we don't face that reality, I don't want people to see that video, but there are testimonies, there are books, there are genocide memorials, and they should be, experts should really see how. From myself, I have young kids. I don't know how to. The question that Laura asked, I asked this myself on April 7th. My son asked a question and I don't know how I can answer that question. It's at his age, he's 8 years old. How do I explain things that, I experienced? Maybe I was a bit older than him now, but almost not very much older than there is, and then there are testimonies things I can tell a kid of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 27 years, people who didn't witness this. How do we tell them? Because they need to know. They are the genocide memorials. People, I don't know if people really visit memorials. We have memorials. Foreigners do visit. Sometimes deniers are saying that we are selling bonds of our loved ones. Maybe it's because we don't visit enough, they only see foreigners. Well, I'm not saying but really we have to have this knowledge, to be familiar, to be able to take in even the hard truth, the hard things that were very heavy for our imagination. We need to be able to face that and to find a way progressively, depending on the age of our younger ones, and see how to let them, have their mind grasp the reality of the genocide. I think that is, for me, education, knowledge, and of course there are secondary sources, there are analyses that are made, there are theories about the genocide. That is very important, to be able to articulate theoretically, to look at the causes and the consequences. But these testimonies of survivors, these memorials are there they are the primary tools, for me, they are primary tools of education that people need to make, to bring to everyone. As for seeing denial, like, increasingly, occupying space, I don't think it's, if we are doing the right thing, it wouldn't really matter how many of them are, if we have our people, our young people, well educated, aware of really of their past, of their history, it wouldn't really matter much, because even to stop the genocide, there were more killers than RPF fighters trying to stop the genocide and rescuing Tutsis. And, the number and the noises wouldn't matter that much, as long as we are doing the right thing, from education and having this knowledge of the genocide from the primary sources. And I think that's the weapon, and that's the space. Even one person on a platform with 10 or 20 deniers, of course, like Jessica said, it's not very healthy to debate them. It's very hard, but even one with facts, with good maîtrise of our history, we wouldn't really have a problem. We wouldn't be shaken by their noises, their nonsense. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Christian, I want to come back to you. Earlier on, you were talking about the fact that the increase in denial that we're seeing, especially in the digital space, is being primarily driven or fueled by young people. So I have two questions to you. The first is, why should young people care about denial? And number two, is there anything you've been doing using the platform that you have to be able to counter denial narratives?
Excuse me, come again for the first question?
The first question is, why should young people care about fighting genocide denial? Why does it concern them?
First of all, if you look at the other association Jessica talked about, Jambo, we have young people there, people that I'm 5, 6, 7 years older than them. Even me, I was very, very, very young during the genocide. But these people are talking about the events of what happened during the genocide, before the genocide, or even after, like they were there, you know, because they have people who are feeding them those information. So the reason why I'm saying this is because young people should be very, very interested in knowing what happened, because they are the Rwanda of tomorrow, you know?
Mm-hmm.
These are the people that are going to defend what RPA fought for, you know? Because if you have someone who is 25 years old today, in the next 10 years, they will be the ones leading this country, you know?
Mm.
So we need to educate. Actually, us as young people, we should start educating ourselves on the history, using the resources we have. This government you have is trying the best they can to create ways that youth can use to educate themselves. As Olivier said, we have memorial sites. We have people that have been part of the liberation war. Most of these people, if you've met some of them, they're always happy to see people asking them questions of what happened. So it's time we approach some of them and ask all those questions. You should start asking yourself why these people hate us so much. We are all Rwandese, but still today, some people, they're on the point of killing themselves because of how they hate us, you know, of how they hate this country, you know. So it will be, we need to, as young people, we need to start educating ourselves, because otherwise we won't be able to defend what people have been working so hard for the last 27 years. So the second question was,
what are you doing using the platform that you have to be able to counter these narratives?
Oh yeah, like as our past initiative, we are creating ways that are very easy for the youth. Like easy way of communicating to young people is using art, music, drama, and different ways where youth will be very interested to follow and learn one or two things. And again, with the youth that attend the events, some of them who wants, we even take them to where we are doing our projects, helping genocide survivors renovating their houses. Like that, you know, sometimes it's very hard to convince someone that, let's say, the genocide against the Tutsi happened, when they know they have all the relatives at their homes, they have everything they need. But the time you take them and they meet someone who is the only one who survived during the genocide, those people start, things start making sense to them. Things start looking real, you know? They start asking questions like, how did you survive, you know? And that's when they will even start asking questions to their relatives, to their parents, or to their friends, you know. Yeah. So all we are trying to do is creating ways that, you know, another thing we have realized during the process is that some of those kids, the parents are still going through some trauma, you know. So it's so hard for them to tell the kids what they went through back in 1994 during the genocide against the Tutsi. So creating those platforms help us to help those young people to start asking some of the questions that the parents might have answers, but they didn't want to give them yet, you know. So creating those platforms, doing the event, our past event, inviting the people who are more experienced in history, who knows more about the liberation war. We are trying to create ways where young people will be easily educated on the history, you know, because actually we realized that a few years back when we started getting people asking questions, you know, people are asking you questions you don't even have answer
Have an
for, you
answer.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that's when, you know, they're getting more interested in knowing the truth, you know. So we are trying to push as much as we can. We have some government institutions on board already trying to help us to push. And I think in the next 1 or 2 years, we'll be somewhere where we can start campaigns in schools. And after the question we had during our past of this year, someone from Germany asked, is there a way that CNRG and Minedik and those institutions are creating for that can help young people to start having critical thinking? And the executive secretary of CNRG said that they are working with Minedik to create ways that the history, mostly the genocide, the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, can be part of the education system that we have today. So I think we are getting there slowly.
So trying to summarize, you talked about the fact that you're trying to find the youth where they are through mediums that they're most comfortable with, like art, music, poetry, theater. Yes. And you're also trying to bring them firsthand witnessing or experience of the people that actually survived the genocide that you've been helping in different ways. Yes. Thank you very much, Christian. I will let Ariane ask the next question. Before Ariane asks the questions, though, I'd like to, I see some people have already posted the questions using the question and answer tool. Feel free to keep doing so. This is the last question that we're going to tackle, and Flo will then be open to questions and answers. You can also raise your hand and we will give you permission to unmute yourself and ask the question directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. The last question that I have will go to Olivier as a genocide survivor. And the first question, Olivier, what effect does denial have on survivors and how can we support them? That is the first part of the question. And the sub-question to this is that in the attempt to counter denial, especially during this Kwibuka 27, some are recounting the worst experiences or sharing graphic images or videos, I mean survivors, on different digital media platforms. How can we fight denial without re-traumatizing survivors? Feel free to tell me if I have to repeat the questions. I won't mind.
Yeah, the first was about the effect of denial. There was a second part on that question.
So the second part is that there is a video that you mentioned earlier on that is being circulating on Twitter. I saw it myself, and we have seen during this Kwibuka 27, in the attempt to counter denial, a lot of survivors are encountering their worst experiences. And we have also seen that people are sharing the graphic images and videos, like the video that you mentioned. How can we fight denial without re-traumatizing survivors? Because I do believe personally, what I do is in the attempt to protect my mental health, I don't engage much with these videos because they just put me in a place that I currently don't want to be. So how can we best fight denial without re-traumatizing survivors? And that is the sub-question to the first question.
It's a very existential question. I think for a survivor, of course, there are individual experiences. There are the people live those experiences differently, and they cope. The coping mechanisms. We have heard, we have seen testimonies of people who are. I watched, for instance, the testimony of at the UN in Geneva of Nadia Garnier. I think she said it was the first time to tell her testimony 27 years later. And as you mentioned, even on social media, they are very tough, very hard, some graphic testimonies. So I don't know how to, when a survivor is telling their story, I don't know how would tell them to filter, because sometimes it just comes spontaneous. Of course, when it is written, one can always edit and think about. But the audience, it's true. The audience, the audience very end can have a very devastating effect on people, especially videos. That I agree. And we know that there are young people even accessing these platforms. So on the effect of denial, if I go back on the first part, on the effect of denial, of course, it is very destructive. It is very exhausting. Sometimes I don't know. I ask myself, or even among friends, we sometimes wonder how, if maybe one shouldn't like shut down and forget and do other things to be able to live longer. Sometimes I wonder if I will live, if in 5-10 years I will still be like mentally sane, but then you also want to think that it's an imperative. This is an imperative. So it is, I think it is, denial is there. It's part of I think fighting denial is part of survival. One cannot give up on his or her survival. During the genocide, people weren't, there are people who would be afraid even to go to hide. There are people who would pray. There are people who would, I remember when we left, there were people who would rather go, before in the church, before the altar, and they were fighting for spaces on the altar rather than fleeing, because they were like, only God could save us. You wouldn't convince them otherwise. You wouldn't convince them. And it's, as we are surviving 27 years later, the effect of denial, some can, face it and challenge it. Others could rather stay away from it. I would understand. But whatever coping mechanism, whatever reaction or approach one takes, as it is part of the genocide, it will be it will keep haunting, it will keep destroying it keeps destroying. Every year it is exhausting, and we need help.
I agree with you.
I think it's no one can deny that it's trauma is increasing. Even those who are younger, those who are older, and those who are active in fighting denial, in telling the story of the genocide. Definitely, it has effects. It is inevitable.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Jessica,
I think there is, I don't know whether I commented on telling without telling, showing without re-traumatizing. It's true. They are like those footage, that footage showing, but fortunately I think it was cut short before but there is a part of the story that shouldn't really be exposed to the public domain for everyone, because that could be a relative to someone, and maybe it could be really devastating. They need to be thought and care put in what we are putting out. I think for survivors, when they feel like they're ready, or they want to release what they have, like the story we read on this young man, I think he now is working in the media, telling the story of his sister, the way she was killed she was pregnant with twins. It is very, very hard when one reads it and really breaks you feel it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart. It breaks. But I don't know. Would I tell him not to share the story? No, I would rather that story. If when someone is capable, feels like to get at the level of telling that story, it means he has been able to transcend, to some extent, to transcend that, and to own it, and to have power over that pain, and be able to share it. I think it's now up to the public to protect those who would not be able to process it, to reading such a testimony. I think that's what I would say on that question.
Olivier, thank you very much for your intervention. Let's now open the floor to the question and answers. I would like to start with some that are not really questions, more like thoughts on the discussion. We have, let me see, we have Seth Utera, who says, I want to echo what Olivier mentioned. It doesn't matter how big deniers are in number. We are able to face them if we are, he's talking about the youth, if we are well-equipped, educated with facts and essential tools. This is majorly on the digital platforms that the youth use on a daily basis. We also have another one, I see they're anonymous, but they said, to briefly contribute to Laura's question earlier, I think that the element of resilience is fundamental when talking about genocide survivors. It is a helpful factor to keep mentioning when addressing the genocide against the Tutsi, especially when trying to inform young minds. We have another one who says that he encourages survivors to write their stories of survival in books. And I think that Rwandans are not very that reading culture is not very developed, but I think that we have seen a rise in people actually writing books to share their testimonies. Going to the questions now, we have Rugamba Arthur, who wants to ask Olivier, how far has education helped in teaching our history about the genocide? What should be improved in teaching that history so that the young generation keeps the fight on people who deny the genocide? There is another question that says, this one is to Christian, and it says, it's from Gloria Umgali, and she says, how do you think we can build a bridge between young people from the two distinct backgrounds you have described earlier, that of genocide survivors and that of genocide perpetrators who fled the country and are teaching and instilling negationism in their children? Let's start with those two. Christian, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you so much. That's so hard. I think let's just, as young people who have many platforms, I think I have like 5 social media platforms that I use. So let's use them to put out the truth of what we know. Let's first educate ourselves and try to engage conversations that says what really happens and what is happening right now. Because the reason why we are all sitting where we are, we are able to communicate and we have the freedom, if I can call it like that, to do whatever we want right now. That means we have the leaders that build this country, every sector that we want to use, security, economic, and all other sectors. So let's use the platforms we have to communicate what is going on in our country. If those people are interested to know more, I think the country, even the leaders, will be very interested to help out. But it's so hard for me to tell you that one day we'll wake up and find them here, happy with us. They will. I don't know. I think we just need to keep pushing hard to educate everyone on what happened and how far the country is today. Maybe some of them will change their minds. And I think you have something called Come and See. I've heard about that. It's kind of an institution that helps diaspora to come and see how far we are today as a country, how far we've come. So maybe some of them, if they are very interested to know, we'll find ways to help them know the truth of what happened and how far the country is today. But saying that we'll walk up one day and find them here, so hard.
Thank you, Christian. Olivier, I would like to repeat the question that was addressed to you, just as a reminder. The question is, how far has education helped in teaching our history about the genocide? What should be improved in teaching that history so that the young generation keeps the fight on deniers?
It's a very important question that Arthur asked, because really education is key, is central to of course to the country, but also to the question of genocide denial, healing, and healing the nation through education and teaching history. I don't know very well what the curriculum is like in primary, secondary education, in the secondary school, sorry. The content, the methodology. Of course, the education system needs teachers and needs tools, needs apart from the content and the methodology and looking at the age, considering the age of kids, but also the teachers and the what I believe is that would be my analysis, that in the past maybe the focus has been more on rebuilding, because teaching history definitely is going to open a debate and a reflection on a chapter in history that hasn't been told to young people. I don't think it has been there in the education. Young people today, how do you teach a history to a primary school child, 10, 12 years today, or who is 15 in secondary school, about the genocide? And at the same time, the vision of the country that is, that is addressing the problem of ethnicity, the way it was defined, and how we want to redefine our country today with regards to those categories of ethnicity. How do you teach the history? Facts, which are facts, that things that happened on the basis of ethnicity, and at the same time teach a child that, those categories, the way they were defined, the way those identities we had, and which were the basis for that history, those categories, we are no longer what we used to be. So I think there has to be a methodology, there has to be really a reflection, a deep reflection on, I don't know how it is, I will confess, I don't know how it is the history of Rwanda, the history of the genocide, it is taught, but I think there needs to develop that content and to have teachers trained and dedicated, and to find tools and again, I insist on it will take it's necessary that children at a certain time, at a certain age, are exposed or are educated about the genocide, and these memorials need to be ours. They need to be ours. They don't need to be monuments to see when someone is driving past some memorial. These are places that we need to remember, that they are places, they are resting places for people. There are people, our loved ones, who are resting there, and have that connection. That connection with memorials. It's very important for children to visit and to learn from. Those are teaching tools that I don't think we are exploiting sufficiently.
Thank you very much. I want to add just a small contribution to what you said about education being very key in helping young people understand the history of their country, and also be more willing to be actively involved in fighting denial. I would like to add that, in my opinion, what I believe needs to happen needs to change in the way that genocide is taught in schools is to add the already existing component of telling the facts, which is there, and it's amazing. You really get to know progressively what happened, when, by who. But I think there's an element that's missing, and I keep saying this, that we need to also talk a little bit about, not just a little bit actually, about the psychological processes that allow for something like genocide to happen, because genocide is not committed by monsters. They're not monsters who are born monsters, they are made into monsters. There is indoctrination that happens. There are processes that make people who have lived in a society where we had social classes for hundreds of years, when in 1932 they were introduced into ID cards and made into ethnic groups. There is a reason why we believed that so easily, despite hundreds of years of history that counted this. So what are those processes? How can we understand that genocide is not tied to a place? It is not because we're in Africa. It is the way we react to things around us. And when we understand that, we can be much more careful in seeing the symptoms of mass violence and the symptoms of genocide before they happen, and make sure that we call them out, we speak out against them, and we do our best to make sure that it does not happen ever again. That was my contribution to what you said. There is another question that I would like to direct to Jessica. Jessica, the question is, how can we proactively organize to fight against denial instead of fighting individually? Because the forces of denial need to be met by an equal force. How do we make sure that we do it as a collective?
C'est vrai qu'il est clair que lorsque l'on observe les raids des négationnistes sur les réseaux sociaux, ils sont très organisés. Ils savent, par exemple, tweeter en nombre au bon moment, à un moment exact. Donc, ça implique qu'ils sont très probablement en lien, probablement dans des boucles WhatsApp, des choses comme ça. Donc, c'est des choses que nous devons faire aussi. Parce qu'effectivement, quand je disais « il ne faut pas répondre aux négationnistes », en fait, je le fais. C'est juste en débat télévisé avec des idéologues que là, il se trouve que c'est un petit peu compliqué. Mais c'est vrai qu'on a tendance à s'épuiser individuellement face à vraiment des véritables opérations de communication très coordonnées, très organisées. Et nous avons un grand progrès, c'est vrai, à nous coordonner pour nous aussi riposter, mais pas seulement. Imposer aussi nos narrations et imposer les témoignages précieux des personnes survivantes sur tous les réseaux sur lesquels nous sommes.
Yes. Jessica says that it is true that deniers are very, very well organized. They know when to tweet at the right moment for them, obviously. Which leads to believe that they probably have different fora where they organize themselves, where they coordinate what I could call attacks in a sense. While on the other hand, survivors tend to exhaust themselves trying to fight them off individually. And she says that, yes, it is very necessary that we also have forums, we have spaces where we can actually come together and do that work that allows us to not have different voices, individual voices fighting, but actually come collectively together to counter these narratives. Thank you very much. I think we have a couple more questions that we'd like to answer as we get to the end of tonight, because we're ending in about 5 minutes now. We have a question that says, we are seeing a new breed of genocide against the Tutsi deniers who say they're survivors. They're in Rwanda and using YouTube and other social media platform to propagate these narratives. How should we process and fight them? We also have another question for Jessica. It is in French and it says, y a-t-il des Français qui vous approchent pour savoir plus sur le génocide plutôt qu'écouter des négationnistes. Whoever would like to go first.
Je vais y aller sur la question en français. En fait, oui, j'ai le privilège au sein de l'association Ibuka de faire partie d'actions éducatives, donc d'aller dans les collèges et les lycées, certaines universités aussi et grandes écoles, pour faire une conférence historique et de témoignage sur le génocide contre les Tutsis. Et ça, c'est vraiment une action qu'on aimerait développer parce qu'on sent vraiment l'utilité. Ce qui se passe, c'est que, par exemple, je vais accompagner moi ou d'autres personnes, hein, nous sommes énormément à le faire dans l'association, mais je vais accompagner une personne survivante et en fait faire une introduction d'une quarantaine de minutes sur l'histoire du Rwanda avant le génocide, pendant le génocide et après le génocide. Ensuite, je fais vraiment attention à bien expliquer ce qu'est le négationnisme et le travail de mémoire pour faire en sorte que tous ces étudiants, jeunes, moins jeunes, sachent vraiment eux aussi prendre part à ce combat. Parce que ça ne doit pas être que nous, ça ne doit pas être uniquement notre fardeau. Donc, je leur fais bien comprendre, en tout cas quand je fais ces conférences, qu'il ne s'agit pas pour nous d'aller voir des jeunes étudiants pour les rendre tristes ou leur dire que notre histoire est la plus importante. Il s'agit vraiment effectivement de susciter des émotions en eux, mais de faire en sorte qu'ils sachent ensuite quoi faire de ces émotions. Et quoi faire, ça veut dire lutter contre le négationnisme et faire en sorte que ces crimes contre l'humanité, ce crime de génocide ne se reproduisent plus jamais. Et nous avons souvent des discussions autour de la production des récits négationnistes. Et là, on débat sur, par exemple, des films négationnistes, des séries négationnistes. Et c'est vraiment quelque chose de très utile. Étant donné qu'on fait ces conférences et qu'on communique beaucoup dessus, il y a des personnes aussi qui nous demandent si nous pourrions faire ces conférences-là pour des adultes. Donc, on est en train d'y réfléchir, notamment pour l'année prochaine. Et avec le développement de ces conférences par Zoom, ça sera tout à fait possible. Maintenant, ce qui est assez délicat, c'est que nous ne sommes pas assez pour couvrir toutes les écoles, collèges, lycées, universités de France. Alors, on essaie aussi de développer des outils, notamment avec un partenaire, la Ligue de l'enseignement, pour que les professeurs puissent aborder notre histoire dans tous ses volets, dont le négationnisme, seul sans nous. Mais cet aspect-là du témoignage et d'accompagner le témoin auprès des jeunes publics, c'est vraiment quelque chose qui change la donne. Les élèves nous le disent eux-mêmes, les jeunes nous le disent eux-mêmes. Si leur professeur leur racontait l'exacte même histoire, mais de la bouche de leur professeur, ça les toucherait beaucoup moins. On a pu aussi faire cette expérience auprès de publics de jeunes Rwandais. Et c'est là où je rejoins un petit peu je réponds un petit peu à la question de Laure. On s'est posé la question de comment faire avec la nouvelle génération de Rwandais dans la diaspora qui ont peur ou pas envie ou des appréhensions quant à la connaissance de l'histoire du génocide contre les Tutsis. Et on a vraiment réussi à échanger sur le fait qu'il ne s'agissait pas de forcer les jeunes à lire des livres, écouter des témoignages, mais de les laisser aussi faire leur propre pas vers notre histoire, que de toute manière, ils y viendraient. Et s'agissant aussi du militantisme et du combat, on se disait que quelque part, il était sain que ce ne soit pas tous les jeunes Rwandais qui soient dans le combat, mais que certains puissent aussi vivre leur vie comme on peut le souhaiter à toute personne. Donc, c'est pour ça qu'on a cet entre-deux de nous, tout faire pour mettre les outils dans les mains des jeunes générations, qu'elles soient françaises, allemandes ou rwandaises. Nous, on a cette responsabilité-là de mettre à disposition nos savoirs, nos plateformes, nos associations, des livres, des films. Mais de l'autre côté, il faut s'intéresser à l'histoire, mais dans une démarche saine pour effectivement ne pas imposer peut-être un trauma à des jeunes qui seraient déjà fragilisés du fait de l'histoire de leur famille.
Merci beaucoup, Jessica. Jessica says that she has a privilege with in Ibuka, France, to be able to visit different universities and college and high schools where they get to expound on the history of the genocide. She was saying that she's going to very soon accompany a genocide survivor who will be sharing their testimony, but that she will have about 40 minutes of introduction to really be able to talk about the history of the genocide, the history of Rwanda. And she says that she always makes an effort to really explain the interrelation between genocide and its denial, and to make their audience understand that the goal is not to make them sad or to tell them that Rwandans have more painful stories. The goal is to make them understand that it is important for them to be involved in fighting against the genocide. She says that they've been asked to organize these kinds of talks and debates and discussions for adults too, and it's something that they're looking to do with the coming year. But she says that the issue that remains now is that there's still very few, and they're not able to visit all the schools or all the universities. So they're trying to broker partnerships with different other organizations in order to help them broaden their reach. And she mentions that they've really seen the impact of this. They've had students come up to them and say that things would really be different if their own teachers told them even a portion of the history that they get to learn and understand during these talks. I see someone raising their hands. I would like to allow them to talk, but this will be the last question of the night as we close off this this talk. Unfortunately, we cannot be able to accommodate all the questions, but please do make sure to keep interacting with Digital Kwibuka, and we'll make sure that we give them the space online, our panelists, to keep interacting with you and answering all the questions that you may have. I see that the hand is gone now, so I will just look through the questions, the open questions that we still have. It's not really a question, it's more of a contribution. We have someone who says that, I think it is our responsibility as a youth to collect enough information for genocide deniers not to have a way to start the journey of fighting us. So as Christian said, we should make proper use of the resources that are available to us and speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. If you would allow me, I would like to thank everybody who joined us, the attendees. We have people joining us here on Zoom. We have people who were following live on YouTube. Thank you so much for making the time and for spending 2 hours with us discussing on this topic. I would like to thank very, very much all the panelists that we have who really gave us very deep insights into the different aspects of denial and for their wisdom. Jessica, merci beaucoup pour avoir accepté notre invitation et pour toutes tes contributions à la discussion. Christian, thank you very much. Olivier, thank you for bringing an aspect of personal lived experiences to this conversation. I believe that it was very, very powerful, at least to me, but I hope that I'm not speaking for myself. I will let Ariane also give a closing remarks if she has any.
All right. Thank you for the closing remark. I'll just like to share as a genocide survivor myself. Last year, my own child turned the same age that I had during the 94 genocide, and one evening after dinner, he looked at me and said, "Maman, est-ce qu'un jour moi aussi je vais mourir du génocide?" And that fueled the intention that I have right now and understand my contribution and understand that one day as genocide survivors, we will not be here. So we have to be intentional about the knowledge, about the information that we give as time allows. And we also have to understand that educating correctly our community is what will prevent the genocide to happen, be it in Rwanda or anywhere else in the world. So I would like to thank the panelists for their insightful information and remind every one of us that we don't educate ourselves about the genocide to be able to fight denial. We educate ourselves to prevent the genocide to happen. Thank you very much for being with us for these last 2 hours. And as Bruce mentioned, we will not be able to answer all the questions due to time, but let's keep interacting on digital Kwibuka platform so that we can let questions be answered. Thank you, and have a nice evening or day, depending on where you are in the world.
Thank you. Just one small reminder, tomorrow is the last day of the commemoration week. And on the Kwibuka, digital Kwibuka calendar, we are going to be using the hashtag Kwibuka to tell stories, share, anecdotes or stories or testimonies of the people that we lost during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. I would like to remind you all that the reason for this is we want to remind them for the lives they lived, more so than the deaths they endured. We would like to really humanize who they were, bring them the dignity that they were denied, and allow ourselves to see them for the three-dimensional humans that they were. So please, I encourage you all to interact with them. If you have a picture you would like to share, if you have a story about someone that who was close to you and died that you would like to share, feel free to do so using the hashtag Kwibuka. Thank you so much for having been with us throughout the whole week, for the different talks that we had, for engaging with the different hashtags that we try to use in order to bring comforting messages to survivors online, and for really coming together as a community to help each other remember, even if it is in a very particular manner, given the COVID-19 pandemic that we are still living in. Thank you very much. We appreciate your efforts. We appreciate your candor, and we appreciate your support. I hope we will see you again tomorrow. Have a good night, everyone.